Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. Malignant Young Puck dotting saw my chess, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. I went ahead and stepped off of Wesley So for a game. They don't start until 3 o'clock, which is 3 hours from now my time. So, there's a lot of kind of idle morning time. I figured I'd go ahead and hop on and do one of the really nice games from yesterday between Leinier Dominguez Perez and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. So, as always, my people in the Philippines, I will say mabuhay to you. Kamusta na? King Makaibigan, Masaya Komakiri Kambuli. Appreciate you guys very much for stopping by and taking a look at my stuff. Hello, Ulit. Appreciate it very much. For anybody who is coming, Leinier Dominguez Perez is originally from Cuba. So anybody who is coming from Cuba or who is Spanish speaking, I would say buenos dias or buenos tardes. ¿Cómo está? Muchas gracias para ver mi video. Bienvenidos a mi YouTube y mi channel. Appreciate it very much. Muchas gracias, mis amigos. Anybody who is coming from France, I will say bonjour to you. Comment ça va? Comment allez-vous? Ça me fait plaisir de te voir, mes amis. Appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. Merci beaucoup. Thanks, everybody. And if you guys are ready to go, let's take a look and see what we have for this game. So we got e4, c5. So we do have the Sicilian on the board. Knight comes to f3. We got d6, d4, pawn takes d4, knight takes d4. And as I always tell you guys, this is going to be by far the most common way that you see the Sicilian played. There are there are many different options that you can play. There's really just as far as the Sicilian goes, the possibilities are just endless. So you can literally play whatever you want to play. But this is going to be by far the most common and, one of the strongest ways to play. So we got knight coming to f6, which is also the #1 move in the position. We have knight to c3, and then we have a6. So we have the Sicilian Najdorf variation. As you guys, I'm sure, are familiar. I've had him as my chess legend. They named the opening after Miguel Najdorf. We got bishop to e3 in this position. Now, there are so many different possibilities. I mean, pretty much there isn't a wrong move in this position as white. We've seen so many different things. I mean, you have bishop to e2. You have bishop coming to c4. Even in rare lines, you see some a4s coming. I played bishop to g5 myself personally. I feel like this is one of the strongest ways to play against the Najdorf. But yeah, everybody has their own style and their own flavor. So Dominguez Perez, he goes ahead and plays bishop to e3. We have e5. Knight comes down to b3. This is one of those situations where almost always you see the d6 pawn be backward for black. So it can either be a blessing or a curse. In some variations, in some lines, it becomes very, very easy to target this pawn and try to snap it off the board. Other times it's not so simple. But always when you're playing this as black, when you're playing the Sicilian as black, and you have this backward pawn, you're going to be playing very actively and make sure that you don't lose it. So we got bishop coming to e6. One of the major squares for white is actually this d5 square. A lot of the times if you can allow bishop to c4 to come in, maybe a f3, knight coming to d5, you can have a really nice outpost for a knight. So black is just trying to make sure that they don't allow that. We got f3, bishop comes to e7. We see queen to d2, castles by black, long castles by white, knight b to d7, and then we have g4. And for those of you that do play e4 and play against the Sicilian as white, a lot of times when you see the Sicilian dragons, you see this very similar type of a setup. Black and white are castling on opposite sides of the board. So you're going to be seeing f3, g4, h4s. You're going to be seeing a6, b5. This is just super common. So we do have b5 as black. And, like I said, opposite side castling, you're going to be throwing your pawns on either side of the board, trying to, disrupt your opponent's pieces and trying to, open some lines up. So we do have g5, the first move disrupting one of black's pieces. We see knight over to h5. We have king over to b1. King to b1 is always a nice move to make when you castle queenside. Because a lot of the times this pawn can become very weak, especially if this knight gets displaced. Because there isn't anything protecting the a3, the a2 pawn. Knight comes to b6. We see knight to a5, which seems like a weird move, but it's okay now because the knight is blocking the queen's influence on a5. We see rook to c8. We got knight up to d5. Knight takes d5. Pawn takes d5. Bishop takes d5. Queen takes d5. And then we have queen takes a5. So, you know, it's interesting because this position shows like not a considerable, like a slight advantage for white, even though white is down a pawn. I'm not honestly sure why, you know, the computer is giving, you know, slight advantage for white in this position. You know, being down a pawn. To me, I feel like psychologically, like I would just kind of feel like I was down some. You know, maybe it's the placement of the queen because the queen is undefended. The knight, I mean, maybe these two pieces that aren't placed the best. And all three of these pieces are actually undefended at the moment. So it's probably like a coordination of the pieces type of situation. So we have c4. We have knight to f4. We can't allow that knight to live. So bishop takes f4. Pawn takes f4, and then we have h4, just making sure that we protect this pawn. You know, this queen is actually pinned at the moment, or the pawn is pinned because the queen is undefended, like I said before. So queen to a4 not only unpins, but also places an attack on this rook. If the queen was to move, like let's say you play something like this, I mean, you know, it's going to be, you know, knocking the queen away a little bit. So we have bishop to d3. Pawn takes c4, and then we have a really accurate queen to e4. And this is just taking advantage of the fact that now the pawn is pinned again to the queen. So, I mean, you know, black is having a little bit of problems kind of getting their stuff rolling. So, due to initiative, probably that's one of the main reasons why the computer is giving white such an advantage. And, you know, of course, we need to block this check. So, we see g6. We see bishop back to c2, placing an attack on the queen. The queen comes back to d7. We have h5. Queen comes to e6. We see pawn takes g6. And we definitely don't want to trade immediately because we're going to be looking at, you know, the pawn takes and we're going to be getting our pawn back. So, you know, the rook will probably take back and, you know, you got the bishop here, but, you know, you've managed to get your get a pawn back. So, we see h takes g6. We see queen takes f4. And white is still down a pawn, but they do have a lot of activity. As you guys can see, they have this whole open H file. And, you know, the king isn't the most comfortable in this position over here. So, you know, white definitely has a nice initiative going. So we see queen to e5. You know, black is really wanting to trade queens because that will eliminate a lot of the pressure. Black just doesn't want to do that. And so, you know, it might seem like, you know, this pawn is attacked twice. But, I mean, you are threatening checkmate here or here. So, I mean, you know, that's not an issue. Queen comes back to g7, and it seems like it kind of holds everything. But, you know, like I said, I mean, you just have way too much activity for these pieces. This bishop is slicing over here. You know, this rook and queen are both putting, you know, black in some really, you know, a really pressure situation. This rook has the ability to start getting into the game and stuff like that. So, rook comes to d2. We see rook down to c5, but this is easily protected with f4. You know, we're not worried about, you know, the bishop or the rook trying to take g5. We see f6. And f6 is really the critical move. The position was, like, very favorable for white. But this just, like, horribly, you know, damages white's position. And the main reason why is the fact that before you make this move, you are not worried about dark square weaknesses because, you know, white doesn't have a dark square bishop. But unfortunately, after the move f6, which is a very typical, like, thematic pawn push in a lot of French defense type situations. So, I mean, you know, it's always something that you want to kind of think about, like, as far as just getting free and stuff like that. The problem now is these light squares are very, very heavily weakened on this diagonal. So this bishop and the queen, you know, getting into certain positions can definitely start to take advantage of that. So this is just very, very weakening. Also, this pawn is a little bit, you know, undefended or underdefended, I guess I should say. So, I mean, you definitely have some ability to start to try to target that as well. And it's just, you know, creating a lot more weaknesses around the king as well. So you have to be really, really careful when you're moving pawns in front of your king. So we see rook d to h2, and you guys can see that the pressure on the king side is just enormous. And we see pawn takes g5. So you have a decision that you want to make in this position. there's actually a really, really beautiful move in the position. You know, Leinier Dominguez Perez did find it. And they're actually considering giving him the Brilliancy prize for this actual move. And I actually honestly think it's a very hard move to find. So if you want to go ahead and pause the video and see if you can find this move that Leinier played, go ahead and do so. Okay, so I think the reason why this move is really kind of hard to find is because it seems like a retreating move, and it seems like you like deactivate your piece that you're moving like to the maximum, but it's actually a redirecting move. So it's kind of like when you put your knight on the rim, it kind of seems like sometimes that's just not doing anything good for your position, and it's just going to be grim. But a lot of the times it's redirecting the knight to like a really nice square. So the move is actually queen to e1. And like I said, I don't think this is the most obvious move to find, because you feel like, man, I need to be pushing forward. I need to be doing something like attacking, like I need to be killing black somewhere. You know, so for you to make a move like queen to e1, it just kind of seems like it puts your queen on like the worst square that it could be on. And you're like, why am I backing my queen all the way up to the back rank? Like, I'm not threatening this bishop because the bishop is protected, but the key square is e6. You know, like I said before, you know, this diagonal is very, very weak. You know, you have just you know, immense amount of pressure on this H file. So what queen to e1 does is it forces black to make like some very precise movements and just to go like into super defense mode. There is absolutely no offense going on with black right now. So you see bishop coming to f6. And then you have rook coming to h6. And I mean, the main problem, as you guys can see, is the fact that, you know, this pawn I mentioned earlier is very munchable right now. So, I mean, you don't really have a lot that you can do. The king is really like almost kind of stalemated. Like, it doesn't really have a lot of good moves that it can do. So the queen comes to b7, trying to, you know, think like, hey, man, on a great day, I could just place checkmate. So like if, let's say, for example, like white plays something that's like lazy, for whatever reason, they just go king to h1, which is a stupid, stupid move. Like, you would just checkmate here, and then it'd be the end of the game. But, I mean, come on now. Like, Leinier Dominguez Perez, he's not about to do this, man. So, that clearly is not about to happen. So, what we actually have in the game, and this is the move that forces resignation, is queen to e6 with check. And I think, for the most part, it looks pretty obvious why queen to e6 check is just ending the game on sight. But for any of you that might not know exactly why the game is completely over, let's go ahead and just take a look at a few variations. The first variation is the best possible way to block this check is with queen to f7. But, I mean, you're just like incredibly lost regardless. So you're going to be looking at rook takes g6 with check. And of course, the queen is pinned and the king is stalemated. It doesn't have any legal moves. So you have to block with the bishop. You're going to be taken with g7 on check. The king is going to be coming to take g7 because, as I said before, the queen cannot move. You see queen to h6 with check, king comes to g8, and then queen to h8 is checkmate. So that is the most direct way to win the game, but everything is mating. It's just some is mating a little bit faster. So if we go back after queen to e6, you know, we still had queen coming to f7, rook to g6, bishop back, rook taking, king taking. And if you just want to be really funny and say, hey, man, I'm just like really sadistic. I really just want to just like do something funny. And I don't want to lose my queen, even though it's mating, right? So there's some people that are just like that. They're like, hey, man, I'm going to take your queen, like for no reason, just to be evil, right? You actually can just go rook to h7 with check. And I mean, the king has to go back up to g8. Rook takes f7, rook takes f7, queen comes to g6. And like I said, if you want to just do this just to be funny, it's a longer checkmate. But if you just really, really love the fact that you made the person lose their queen, go ahead and do so, whatever. But after queen to e6, the only other thing that black can do is go rook to f7. But this is going to be failing horribly to, you know, queen to e8. You know, rook coming back up to f8, queen taking on g6. And then after, I mean, either one, either the bishop or the queen comes to block. You actually have rook to h8 with checkmate. And so, like I said, literally everything is mating. And of course, backing up here, you know, you can't go here because then the queen is going to come to h8 with checkmate. So it's like short checkmates or long checkmates, but it's all over with. And I mean, I'm not sure how much of this that Leinier noticed or Maxime Vachier-Lagrave noticed in this position, but I mean, you could just feel that it's just done. So that was an interesting game, like I said. You know, I just figured I'll go ahead and toss a little extra game in there. I'm waiting on the tournament to start in like 2 hours and 45 minutes, so I didn't have nothing else to do. So I appreciate you guys very much. Merci beaucoup, mes amis. Muchas gracias, mis amigos. And Makita Tayo Mamaya and Pa'alam. And I will see you guys next time.